Pam, have you gone live?
And we are live.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Human Resources and Administration Committee meeting. I would like to call the meeting to order and ask our recorder, Pam, to call the roll.
Good morning. Committee Chair Cohen.
Here.
Regent Balducci. Has he joined us yet? Not yet. Regent Jimenez.
Here.
Regent Wright.
Here.
Regent Cohen, you have a quorum.
Thank you. And we also, for the benefit of the people who are on, we are also joined by our Vice Chair, Regent Harris. The first item on our agenda is the approval of the previous meeting minutes. It was, I'm sure you recall vividly, the meeting of February 16th. It was our joint meeting with the Finance Committee, and I have two minor corrections to the minutes. They are on page 2 of the minutes in the paragraph about our committee, the regional president's update. And I would like the last sentence to read that we responded regarding students first and noted that this committee meeting agenda is not the proper venue for the discussion. And I would also like to ask the secretary to change the attendance and move Professor Kalena Sasenker up to the column called committee members and regents participating. Are there other changes? If not, could I please have a motion to adopt the minutes as amended? From Elise, and a second from David.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Nobody opposed? The minutes are adopted as amended. Thank you. Let's move right now to information items. And our first discussion item is the discussion of remote work. We're joined by Mike Lopez and Diane Mazza from our HR department, who have spent probably more time than they ever thought they wanted to, reviewing telework policies and making suggestions for what, if anything, the regents want to do about adopting a policy that allows for telework. I point out to you that when we had the pandemic, we really didn't have a telework policy. What we did was make everybody safe by sending people home, but we had no parameters about what jobs are best suited, how they're approved, the relationship of the employee to the supervisor, et cetera, et cetera. So the discussion today is the beginning discussion, not the adoption of a policy, so that we can go down a list of things that we've culled from other policies and talk about what we would like to have included. Our intention would be not only to develop a draft, but also to share it amongst ourselves and also the people on the campuses who supervise management and confidential employees. This would be a policy that only affects our approximately 300 non-represented by bargaining unit employees. That said, I would like to ask David Jimenez if he'd like to weigh in based on all his experience and wisdom about the kinds of characteristics that a remote work, telework, offsite work, whatever this gets called in the end, policy should include to protect both employer and employee. David unfortunately ran into a conflict, so he won't be with us for the whole meeting. So I'd like to give him the first chance to share with us whatever he'd like to.
Thanks. Thank you, Naomi. And as often you embarrass me by suggesting I have much to offer to the subject of the day.
But you keep coming back for more, David. That's
Yeah, I
important.
just, if you sign me up, I'm there. But and many on this call have equal or greater experience with the subject matter. But from my perspective, like, a couple of thoughts come to mind. I did provide Naomi with some drafts of policies that my firm has developed for other clients, none of which are in higher education. So I would encourage the team at number one, this is not a wheel that has to be invented, right? This is probably, there are policies in higher ed that could be a good starting point, and you probably have already considered that and looked at some peer organizations. Secondly, I like, from an administration perspective, I always like policy and I always like consistency, but we are a complex organization. The state university system is, and so I would encourage you to make sure you partner and hear from different perspectives, be it community college perspectives, university perspectives, and others. And I like policies, to be very frank with you, that are clear, concise, less is more. I like policies that, by their own writing, anticipate revision, meaning we make it clear when does this apply, what year does this come to being, and we make it clear that we may revise this due to changes in the organization and due to unknown small events like a pandemic in the future. So, but beyond that, I don't know that there is anything else, Naomi, that I'm going to want to say now, because I respectfully, my guess is that the team that's been looking at this is probably far ahead, and has already considered many of the things that I suggested. I am happy to answer any questions, but Naomi, that's top of mind for me.
Thank you. I would like to give Mike and Diane Mazza a chance to weigh in on what they've looked at. And I know Elise has had experience, and Merle Harris was on the forefront of these policies when she was the president of Charter Oak. So I would like her to weigh in. And Rich, if you got anything to say, we'll listen. So Mike and Diane, do you want to say something?
Sure, I can start the brief conversation, Naomi. Thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. It's so good to see everybody. I hope everybody had a blessed Easter. So Diane and I have been working on this, Naomi, gathering information, as you had alluded to, regarding some other organizational policies for remote and telework, specifically Charter Oak and UConn's policy. We also gleaned and spent some time reviewing the interim policy for DAS to reflect on that a bit. And really what our goal was, and this speaks to David's comment, in developing, a very streamlined, less is more type policy document, whereas everybody knows you can go on ad nauseum with these remote telework policies and procedures, but we really felt a need to streamline much of this for our managers. And that was what some of the ideas that we had presented. So we've started gathering that input that Naomi suggested. We still have a lot of other stakeholders to draw comments on, specifically our CSCU campus leaders. And we're really looking forward to further developing this, because we found over the last year that this telework, remote work situation has been, for the most part, very, very effective in managing the work. So it's been great working with Diane on this, and with you, Naomi. So I look forward to really tweaking these ideas a bit further as we move to a policy document.
Diane?
Yeah, so thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see everyone. I know some faces, but not everyone. So thank you for having us today. Yeah, we tried to, I tried to look at when we were writing the policy, to look at all the different policies, right? We looked at the Department of Administrative Services. We looked at the Charter Oak one, which was quite lengthy. So we tried to be as concise as possible with this policy because it could go on for pages and pages. I know some policies do. Charter Oak was quite lengthy, but there was a lot of good information in that policy. So we just pulled from different policies and, tried to be as concise as possible. And so we'll take any feedback, and I'm sure there'll be more revisions to the policy as we move forward. So we'll continue to, create that policy and make it more concise for our management confidential employees.
Elise?
Thanks, Naomi. I just have a couple of questions. Some of them are driven by the experience that I had, several years ago when over 40% of the population went to telecommuting. But it was a different environment, and it involved individuals who were customer facing, so that the rules around it may seem a little stricter, but I'm just curious of how you get at some of those issues. So there's two. How do you, during the pandemic, it was a great, you can think of it as the great experiment, because it allowed us to test out some of the ways that we handle telecommuting. But how do you determine if the home environment is appropriate? Because I think our tolerance level for the far from perfect home environment was probably greater during the pandemic. So whether it was the barking dog or the children, but we will get through the pandemic. How do you determine that? That's one. And then the second one is what we ended up doing. Now, this was a corporation. We provided all of the equipment. If in fact someone is using a laptop from the job, that's fine. But we also provided sort of the internet connection, because what we found is home internet connection sometimes wasn't as efficient or as reliable as a business line. So again, it was very different because these were individuals who were, most of whom were direct contact with customers who were calling in. So you needed to make sure that the environment was as professional as if they were in the home office. So I'm just trying to get a sense, if this is a different environment, I understand it perfectly, but just trying to get a sense of how you manage that.
And perhaps I can take a shot at that initially, Elise. So thank you. Those are two excellent points. The first point with the home environment, Elise, I don't anticipate us attending to home visits, if you will, to see what the structure of the home is. What we're hoping to do is, based on the success this past year, is to tweak out the very details that you speak to in the application that these employees are going to need to make to two levels of supervisors, their immediate supervisor and then the second line supervisor. And in that, we have a fairly detailed application that we hope will tease out all of those details that you suggest in regards to, will it be a quiet, work conducive environment? Will it be have periods of no disruptions, etc.? And we also ask for details regarding the equipment they'll be using. So we're hoping that will serve as that verification, if you will, in a very conducive work environment at home. The second piece of that for the equipment, we are hoping to migrate those who have yet to receive a loaner laptop, if you will, and loaner equipment from their respective campus or the system office to move to that provided laptop, so that we can ensure there are specific firewalls in place on that software and so forth, because we're quite concerned, and we've addressed that, I think, in the policy from an IT information security perspective. And we're hoping that by migrating all of our telework users to those loaner laptops, we'll be able to provide that additional level of information security. To your last point regarding the actual internet accessibility, right now the policy document does reflect that that would be a cost that would be borne by the employee, and that service would not in fact be provided by the system office or the respective campus. But I think that along with exactly what equipment package, if you will, that is required still needs to be, I think, tweaked out and specified a bit further.
Okay, we just found that the more people who were online, the less reliable sort of the home personal connectivity was, which caused a problem. So thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Merle, did you want to talk a little bit about the Charter Oak experience? You're on mute.
As was pointed out, the Charter Oak was a pioneer. We did this probably in the early 2000s because we did have IT people, particularly who wanted to work from home, or a couple people had a huge difference. I learned a lot since then, and I learned to relax about it because being kind of a control freak, I had a problem for a while. But there are a couple issues I think that still go back to my control freak question. This may be in the application, I'm not sure. But a lot of people want to make sure that the employee knows what his or her responsibilities are and what the expectations are. I assume that both the employee and the supervisor have to have some kind of a in writing agreement of what those expectations are. Is that correct, Mike?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am. I was on mute. Yes, ma'am. In that application, we'll be asking the employee to specify the scope of their work and their work plan, and to articulate any performance metrics with the supervisor's approval on that. So yes, ma'am. We hope the application will address all of that.
Okay. Another issue is a little bit old-fashioned, but I still think it's important. How people connect by phone. In other words, if I don't know, if I just look up on the staff directory, I have a really important question that I need to have answered, and I call the line, at the office, and no one gets back to me for a couple of days, I get a little annoyed. I would get a little annoyed. How do you control for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. We're doing a predominant amount of our interaction with others, with our colleagues and those that we are supporting on campuses through Microsoft Teams. So we're finding that to be a very timely application that we're using, and we're not necessarily seeing tremendous delays in people getting back to each other in that venue. So to your point, I think that will be an area we'll need to continue to preface, with those that are approved for teleworking, that timely interaction and response is going to be critical to their work plan.
Because I understand if it's coworkers, but if you're a parent calling about an issue, a student financial aid issue, you really are anxious, and quick customer service is important in that regard. So I think there are differences among employees depending on what their job is. I agree, but
Yes,
I think
ma'am.
that is a factor we want to consider because we want to serve our students well, and and others that are a legislator that has an immediate question.
Sure.
Issues
Yes,
like
ma'am.
that. I think at Charter Oak at the time, and I didn't see it in the current policy, you had to check your voicemail periodically, and that was fine, so that at least twice a day, perhaps, so that you did get those calls and get back to people. And
Yes,
I
ma'am.
don't know, I agree with David, you don't want to be that specific, and maybe that goes into the application, but I think that's an important area to think about.
Mike, we want to also mention that we do have our phone messages go into email as well, so that we get an email when we have a phone call and we can play it. So we do have the technology to support it. It requires the employee to take the action, but that is also a technology tool we have.
Good.
Elise?
Yep.
Yeah, when Merle was talking, it prompted another thought, and it's not as much technical, but it has to do with training. And I know that there was reference to sort of the conversations that you have with the people who are telecommuting. But what we found is that folks who are not telecommuting needed training too about how to, you know, when you have staff meetings, to ensure that you're inclusive. If 90% or 95% of the people are in the office and you have 1 or 2 people who are telecommuting, it's to make sure that they're part of the discussion. And sometimes we needed reminders. When you have when you have the Zoom or WebEx arrangements, it's a little easier because you can see the person. But when you don't, it's sometimes you need a reminder that you're bringing people into the that you should be bringing people into the discussion. It's not as critical as some of the other issues, but it made us realize that the sort of the understanding of how it works isn't just incumbent upon a supervisor and the person who is telecommuting. It's also important that colleagues, peers understand sort of the relationship too and how it should work.
In some of the materials that David and Mike and Diane shared with me, there were other concepts that I'd like to try your minds about. Some had a provision that said you need to be employed for at least 6 months to even be eligible to and have satisfactory performance, whatever that means, to be eligible to work remotely. Some had a year as the parameter before you were eligible. Any thoughts on preference?
So I think we did include in the policy eligibility for telecommuting, and we did say that the employee should be performing their job for at least a year, or if the manager assesses that the capability of the employee to be able to telecommute. So, and then we also did say that they have to have, you know, on their service rating meets expectations or higher in order to be eligible to telecommute. So we did put some eligibility requirements in there. We did say a year, but it's up to the discretion of the supervisor to approve that if they've been employed for less than 1 year.
If you're in, do we still do what the state used to do and you're a provisional employee for 6 months?
We still have, yeah, certain, well, we don't have in management confidential, we
We
don't
don't
have.
have that.
No, we don't.
No,
Naomi.
we do
No.
not, no.
Okay.
Naomi,
Go ahead.
I'm gonna be signing off, but just one last point, actually 2 points. One, Mike, I take it the reference to management confidential includes that these are all salaried employees. They're not hourly workers, correct? Because
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's correct.
okay, so we don't have to worry about keeping track of their work time as hourly workers. The second thing is, you know, part of the struggle in trying to be to allow this to be managed in the field by local management is how do you accomplish some degree of consistency in governance. I do think that the policy has to express organizationally whether we favor remote, you know, working from home, or whether it's something that we don't explicitly favor, that we leave it to supervisors. And you might identify at the central office somebody you can go to if, as an employee, you don't feel like your supervisor is sufficiently open to this. You know, I can remember supervisors a long time ago worrying about beeper pay, if you recall that, so there are just some supervisors that are not maybe the pandemic has changed things, but some supervisors are not open to this. And it has a way of disproportionately affecting certain populations of employees who otherwise would be very effective. So I would, for governance perspective, I would identify a centralized resource that can provide some support or Q&A to employees who feel like their local management isn't hearing their needs. And with that, I hope that's helpful. Thank you, Naomi. Great
Thank you.
conversation. Okay.
Thank you, David.
Yes, thank you, David.
All right.
And you'll get another chance.
Okay.
To David's point, one of the things that is found in some of these policies is the fact that this is not a guarantee that you can get it. If you and I have the same job, I may be allowed to telecommute and you may not for whatever reason. And I'm interested in how you feel about that, especially people who've had experience with it. Elise?
I'm sorry, Naomi, you said distinguishing between what
You know,
two things?
Telecommuting is not transferable in the sense that you and I have the same position or same job responsibilities, and your supervisor and the application process allows you to telecommute, and I am not allowed to telecommute. How do we handle that?
Well, there are a couple of things that are referred to in the document that we saw in the draft. First is performance, the ability for a person to do that. But I also think it is the kind of job that you have that would allow you to do that. And sort of it's as the telecommuting population grew, sort of the task became more challenging to figure out what were the types of jobs. Initially, it was people in operations area, and the reason why we did it was to allow a longer period of service to customers. So that allowed it because we had people who worked staggered hours, and so it was in one department. But then it became so popular that other areas wanted to do it that had nothing to do with customer facing jobs. So that was more driven by, the supervisor and the employee agreeing that they in fact could do it. But I think it's important to distinguish between officially, like full-time telecommuting or part-time, however you describe it, and someone who occasionally works from home. And that was something that we had to make clear. That's perfectly okay too, but you don't necessarily have to adhere to the policies of an employee who is officially telecommuting. Does that make sense? Sort of discerning between the two. So I do think the functionality, that how the job is structured, and perhaps having some agreement across the system about what those types of jobs are and getting input from people and making that very different from a person who occasionally works from home. I have a doctor's appointment and I'm working from home. I'm going to be working from home in the morning and then going straight to the doctor's appointment.
That sounds like the story of my life. Another of the things that it talks about, which I know Mike and Diane have considered, and some of the policies I looked at were stronger than others, but we need language in there that talks about the security of the information, what we ask employees to agree to in their application before they allow them to telecommute. And the IT people would, I'm sure, have a much better sense than I do. I don't know how much of the telecommuting jobs would give people info that is protected under FERPA, info that's protected under CSCU's policies. CSCU has pretty robust policies about, safeguarding information. I want to be sure that they have electronic communications policy, an acceptable use policy, an information security policy. I want to be sure that students are also protected.
Naomi,
Mhm.
that I think some of that gets at the issue that I asked before about sort of the equipment, the security, protecting that information, and just sort of, I'll go off to the side a little bit. What we found was a problem was when people forwarded confidential information to their personal computer that
Yeah,
didn't
we,
have
Mm.
that didn't have all the protections that the work computer had. So clarity around sort of the equipment that you use, the security that's provided, and even the consequences of breaching the security parameters.
yeah, that's a good point. There's also in policies, a distinction between what is the responsibility of the employer and what is the responsibility of the employee. And one of the policies, and I can't remember which one that I read, talked about everything from you're responsible for paying the bill for your own lighting. You have to be in a well-lit space. You have to use a surge protector. Are we going to give you the protector? Aren't we going to give you the protector? And all kinds of language, which I assume we could have something in ours about this remote work is not allowing performance of child care or other family care issues. One policy had you have to sign a paper that will show who the family care person is, and you either have to get it from the agency or a notarized certificate. I'm not sure we want to do that, but in fact, I'm pretty sure we don't. But I would think we need to have language that's pretty strong about this is not, this is your work environment, not your family care environment. And for those people who have little kids or other spouses or family members who need care, I know it's not easy, but we need to maintain some kind of thing. And then there's all kinds of responsibilities for our questions about, are we going to pay the employee for anything if we decide I'm using my own internet service or my own copying paper or whatever? Is there a feeling about whose responsibility that is?
We have entertained, Naomi, in some instances, and it's somewhat limited right now, reimbursement for some of those expenses that you've noted. I think that needs to be detailed a bit further as to what obligations CSCU will have, financial obligations on that side of the house. Because as you know, specifically to the issue that I think Elise brought up regarding internet service, the pricing of that could range and run the gamut, if you will. So I do think we'll have to spend a bit more time just teasing out those details as to what will be eligible for potential reimbursement and what simply won't. Right now, you may recall that the policy speaks to the cost of the internet service provider not being an employer responsibility at this point. So I think we'll have to just speak to that a bit further.
Something to think about. If telecommuting is a official part of the work structure, it's not I'm occasionally working at home, but it is sort of is a form. Why wouldn't you provide that employee with the same service that they would receive if they worked in the office? So, as an example, if you were in the office and you needed paper to print out something from your machine, wouldn't the office pay for it? So why would I have to pay for it at home? And I know what I worry about is if people are willing to say, I'll get a business account, I'll get my own paper because of the convenience, are they thinking about it in the same way they would if they went into the office every day? So I would ask that you think about sort of how to structure this in a way that it's just another work environment, and it should be treated as all work environments. And you may decide that the system can only afford X percentage of employees. And that's one of the parameters you put around it, and you decide the criteria for, you know, how many in each location. You guys could figure that out. But the more you can do to make folks understand that this is a work environment, not I'm working from home and the dog is barking and the kids are running around. You know, I think you've said some of those things in there, that this is not daycare. So if it's not a daycare situation, it's not a casual situation, it's a formal work environment, what would that look like? And shouldn't the parameters resemble what it looks like when you come into the office?
And then, you know, I assume on the employer end of responsibility, we are responsible for the employee if the employee is injured on the job, even if the injury happens in the employee's home?
Yes, ma'am. So those worker comp benefits would be adjudicated if the incident happened at home. Based on the submission of the injury report, there would be an investigation on that. We would work with the third-party administrator to determine the eligibility of that submitted claim. And if the third-party administrator had validated that, then yes, those worker comp benefits and rights would be extended to the incident that occurred in their home.
But not for the other people who are in the home. Merle, did you want to?
No, the question I have is if we're not inspecting the workspace, if someone really has wires all over the place and they trip on those wires,
Sure.
aren't they responsible for that? That's one part of the question. The other part relates to insurance as well. If there's a theft, does the person's homeowner insurance have to pay for that, or does our insurance pay for that?
Yeah, that's an excellent point regarding the theft. I don't think we've spent much time on that, so we'll have to address that. And again, this whole issue of the safety at home, you know, we've spent some time and language in the proposal that speaks to that. But I think we need to reflect on that if we want to, as an organization, make the decision not to have home visits, which I think is perhaps the direction we were initially heading. Then that, to your point, we'll have to address, you know, any potential hazards that may in fact exist.
Richie?
Yeah, I just can't believe that somebody spills a cup of coffee on the floor in the kitchen. They get up and slide down and break their leg. We're responsible for that, or worse, going back to what Merle said, having wires around or a broken table that they decide to sit on the edge of and it cracks and they hurt themselves. And then there's a problem of course, privacy. Why would you come into my home? I'm sure that would be something. But
Sure.
why would we be responsible?
Sure.
I'm so I can't quite deal with that one, Michael. It doesn't make sense to me.
Right. And I think that would be addressed in that adjudication of the filed claim. So when they investigate that claim, I would hope that many of those details would be spoken to. But I think you raise an excellent point that the state is also grappling with right now, because as many of you know, many of the state agencies are moving in a somewhat similar direction. So that's a great issue that I think we need to spend a bit more time on regarding the whole issue of liability.
Yeah, and you just want to, and I'll get off, but the point is, it's going to have to cost us more money for insurance, because if they come out to Central or Southern or Tungus or where, they know exactly where they're going. If they have to come to my house in Deep River to check it out, that's an extra expense, driving and finding a location, et cetera, and then go to someone else's house in West Hartford or East Hampton or God knows where, it's automatically got to cost more for insurance just because the wear and tear and the time involved in the whole process. Enough, I know, but that's makes me crazy.
Let me just muddy the waters with a couple other things that I read in a policy, and then I think it's fair to say we've given you a lot more food for thought as we move along. One of the policies I read said you must follow the zoning rules. If you're working at home, does that count as an office? If Alice is working at home and I need to do a project with her, if I go there, does she now have a home office? And does that change her zoning or her insurance? And the other thing that it recommended in one of these policies is that the employer could not give you tax advice. Check with your financial advisor, lawyer, whatever, because are people going to declare their space as a workspace? So I think if we sat here and talked for another couple hours, we could come up with more examples of questions. But I think that this discussion has been very helpful in helping, I hope, Mike and Diane and others to think about this as we move along and we look at further modifications to get us toward a policy. I think it's fair to say, and stop me if anybody in the committee thinks this is wrong, I think it's fair to say that there is interest in having remote work opportunities, but that we need to be extra vigilant and extra careful and try to tease out all the ramifications before we just begin to say it's okay to work as a telecommuter. Is that fair?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, thank you very much, and especially Mike and Diane, because I know you've been looking at this for a while, and we'll appreciate your input as we move forward. Moving right along to item B, a shared service update. We have a number of representatives of our system office to talk to us about IT consolidation, fiscal affairs, and human resources. So let's begin with the IT consolidation until Bilby Davis, did I say that right? Are here to talk to us about shared services for IT. And Alice, I think you might be able to share your screen.
I will, and I do want to make one change that we really want to talk about the IT shared services, not IT consolidation. So we'll clarify that as we move forward. So
Okay, shared
sadly, I
services
have
update
3 different
first.
presentations. So
Okay,
yes,
fine.
I'm going to see if I can't get this together. Oh, I'm getting the wrong one. See, that's not what was supposed to happen. There we go. Let's see if we can do this.
There we go.
All right. I'm gonna play Vanna White, but let Tim walk us
Joe.
through this.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for the
Good
time to
morning,
go
and
over
thank
this.
you.
Problem. So the first slide we're going to go over is the shared services offered in the information technology area. I mean, I think it's good to point out that over the last probably 20 years, we've been providing shared services in various flavors to the colleges as a system, to the universities as a system, and then as the combined CSCU. So that's something that's been going on for many, many years. In the area of as we sit here today, there are different services that are offered to the various institutions. So for all 17 institutions, it's more at a higher level we talk about contracts or licensing. There's some enterprise agreements that are offered to all that are combined for all 17 in the area, like Cisco Voice Services or VMware, Blackboard, some of those kind of areas. As far as standardizing on a common platform, we've done that across all 17 institutions in the area, like Banner or Microsoft, Cisco for networking, Palo for firewalls. So there's a lot of areas that we've kind of come to a common platform. We don't administer those all across all 17, but we've come up with standard approaches in that area. Information security program office, you talked a little bit about that earlier today when I was listening to the teleworking, and there's this information security program that talks about policies and standards and procedures that you're all probably well aware of, risk assessments, that goes across all 17 institutions also. There are a few information systems that do carry across all 17. Library system comes to mind where that's offered for all 17 institutions. Blackboard's another one that is offered to all 17 institutions. Project management within the area of implementing new systems. More recently, like with the move to Banner into the Lucent Cloud, that was project management was provided to help to support that endeavor. And then another area would be data reporting and analytics, which is across all 17 institutions. So those are some of the areas. I'm sure there's other ones, but that kind of gives you a flavor of the offering for all 17 institutions. When it comes to the colleges, again, there's a long history of providing services to all the community colleges from the system office and working closely with the colleges to help to deliver those services. This is a laundry list of those. Voice services is one area. I was interested when we were talking about the telecommuting, and one of the more recent services that we are providing to the colleges is a type of a soft phone called Jabber that can extend the office phone remotely to somebody's home laptop or to their work laptop or to their mobile device, so they can receive calls when they're out of the office, which has helped in the student-facing areas at the colleges. So that was implemented during the pandemic. Video services, another area that we've worked with the colleges on. Email's a big one. Email calendaring, the kind of basic things. We've moved off of on-premise shared directory, shared personal shared areas and department shared areas to use Office 365 with OneDrive and Teams and groups, so that it gets things off of the campus into a cloud provided environment, so you can access that from anywhere. Network services is another area, wired, wireless, across and internet provided to the colleges. Some of these other areas, Everbridge for mass communication. Of course, we've heard of Banner and self-service and MyCom that integrate works. Those were all provided out of the as a shared service. Another area we talked a little bit about was kind of securing our laptops when they go into the field. That's something we provide through the antivirus and data loss prevention on those machines. So there is a level of protection as we talk about telecommuting. If we're giving faculty and staff laptops at home, we can provide some additional controls on those devices. So that does help us in that space. Service management is a big area we've been working with the colleges in that space to provide a service desk and change management process. We'll talk a little bit on the next slide on that one. Print management, just providing print services, service some of these other areas. Another area that's kind of jumped down to would be authentication, single sign-on, Active Directory. All the colleges are utilizing a single infrastructure to support authentication into various services. Over the last year or two, we've implemented more single sign-on service, so that if you authenticate into, say, Banner, and then you go to WebEx, you don't have to authenticate again. It's automatically signing you into that service. So that helps in that area. And then we've added another layer of protection on top of some services, Protective Enclave being one of them, where you have to have a second factor of authentication, so that when you go to authenticate, just like you do with your bank, you've probably seen that before, where you have to have the second factor to get into those more secured systems. And that brings us to the Protective Enclave. Again, we do telecommuting, trying to make sure that the data that is most sensitive is secured. And we have a secure computing environment that's called the Protective Enclave that helps to secure that data into that protected environment. So while you're in that environment, you can't move secure data in and out of it. And it has conditional controls on top of that, so that it is protected. If somebody's working from home on their laptop, they can't access that data on their laptop directly. They have to go through a connection back into the data center and into Protective Enclave to access that data and work in that controlled environment in a virtual environment. So that does add a little bit of protection there. And these other last couple are really more behind the scenes items. we could probably move on to the next item. Vanna, Alex.
I know Vanna's having issues. I don't know why I'm having issues.
Then you can't telecommute.
All right, so the next item is really starts talking about governance. And again, similar to what we've done for shared services over the years, governance has definitely changed and evolved as the system has changed and evolved. Thank you. And so in the areas of community colleges, we've been working with this very closely with Joe D and the colleges to come up with a more formalized structure when we talk about governance within the community colleges. There's a steering committee that's been formed, CAO steering committee, that reviews IT purchases, IT requests that come in from the colleges. In many manners, it could be like a purchase type request. It could be a new design type request that comes into a committee that includes representatives from the colleges, Joe, and then there's a couple of the directors, and then there's some staff from the system office that are part of that, and then the CSU CIO. So that group reviews, evaluates the requests, based on kind of strategic direction, based on kind of where this fits, aligns with other services, or what it's going to take to actually deliver that service from a resource performance management. Kind of all those areas are looked at, and then it's determined if that service should move forward or not, and then prioritized and then again moved on. Where it could go from there also is there's called the Information Technology Solution Team. That's more a technical team that if the sales steering committee wants a more deep dive into kind of the technical availability of that, or technical ability to implement that service, really would be that team would take that service, dig into it further, get additional content experts on that, call in maybe vendors, and dig into how it's going to align with our current computing environment and our infrastructure. So that would be that group. And then we've always had technical teams in various service areas in Blackbird and Banner and student, and that have worked over the years to provide requirements and feedback and support and training to the various services delivered to the colleges. So that's kind of an ongoing thing that's been around for many years. For the state universities in Charter Oak, there's a CIO management team that meets regularly, that has this, obviously the CIOs from the universities, Charter Oak, and the CSU, so the CIO, that talk about strategic direction, making sure that everybody's kind of going down the same path when they're implementing system services and infrastructure. So that really is kind of aligning that. Like recently, we're talking about a firewall refresh for all the 70 institutions. So that kind of would be something that would be aligned in those conversations. And then again, there's also functional teams and technical teams that go across the universities in Charter Oak and the system office to talk through those areas. And then we can jump into the last slide we have is service management. So in order to support the service that being provided, we have a couple things in hand, and then we're continuing to build on this. One of those being an IT service desk services portal. We've had some type of service desk over the years, and more recently we've combined that into a single offering for all the colleges. So it's a single service desk that any of our users of the service can open up a ticket and put in a request for this is broken, or I need this change, or I need this enhancement. So they can contact. There's a single portal that anybody in the whole community college system can connect to and look at their tickets, open up new tickets, do a search of a knowledge base to see if there's any issues that kind of are answered for them. So it was implemented for all 12 colleges fairly recently, and we continue to build on that. The next area is change management. So we've had this in place again for many, many years. This is across all 17 institutions. There's a change advisory board that meets weekly to talk about any changes that are upcoming that might impact a institution or multiple institutions. It could be from implementing a new service to just an upgrade of a service to a Windows update to anything that might impact a service, so that it's communicated, it's out there. The board members vote on changes that impact their institution, And we have a weekly, again, meeting to go over those changes and discuss any service issues. So that's kind of a regular meeting. And the last item that we're working on, Joe D's kind of heading up, is the service level agreements that talk about how the relationship is going to move forward with the IT shared services and the the colleges and the universities who are going to use those services, and what the expected level of service, the outcomes, and kind of making sure that we can deliver those services. So that's kind of an ongoing process that's in the beginning of development.
Thank you, Tim.
Sure.
Joe D, do you have anything you want to add?
No, Tim did a great job. I think he covered everything fantastically.
You trained him very well.
Thanks, Joe.
Are there questions from the committee?
I would just say, oh, I'm sorry, Merle, please.
Go ahead.
Naomi, I am going to have to get off shortly. There's one question, or actually two questions, but the first is, I think that was alluded to at the end, and I would hope with all shared services we're developing KPIs, key performance indicators, so that we can measure whether we're doing the job appropriately across all 17 institutions. I guess SLAs are the same thing, but I think that's really important that we have those, because there's nothing more frustrating in a large organization not to be able to get service or not to get your question answered. So I hope that we do have, we are working on those. I think that's tremendously important to make sure the system works. The other thing, and it's not so much with IT, because IT, I think we've been looking at for a long time now, but in some of the other areas, I look at some of the information and it doesn't note which employees were taken, into the centralized shared service, and are there new employees in that area. I think that's one of the things we always want to be sure about, is that this is cost effective. And it was hard, you don't see that immediately in the information that you shared. So those are the two things.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think we'll put Merle's second question out for a response after the meeting, so that we can find out. I did note that there was in part of the report something about we may be hiring 6 new employees and we've transferred 33 employees. If we could have a picture of a consistent number through all the services that we're sharing, that would be great. Thank you, Tim and Jody, very much. Let's move along to fiscal affairs, where Janelle Wright and Laurie Ewell are here to talk to us.
Good morning. My name is Laura Ewell, and I am the Director of Shared Services, and I work for Janelle. And so I'm here to give you an update on finance shared services, and finance shared services includes payroll, purchasing, accounting, and accounts payable or business services. So we're just going to give you a brief overview here of where we are and open it up for questions. So finance shared services governance really is governed by a steering committee. So we have a steering committee comprised of 15 voting members. There are others who join our meetings and things like that to help us present or give guidance and provide details and things like that to our meetings. But there are 15 voting members, and you can see who the roles that make up those 15 voting members here on this slide. The purpose of the committee really is to make those key decisions for the finance shared services and advise us on matters related to the implementation, the creation and operation of the finance shared services. We bring the service level agreements, the SLAs, to the steering committee, for approval. When those are revised, those go back for approval. Any major decisions comes to the steering committee for approval and discussion. And we meet monthly to discuss those details and give status updates and provide information to that committee. So for payroll shared services, we went live with payroll shared service towards the end of October of 2020. That includes all 12 community colleges, Charter Oak State College, and the system office. And payroll and HR have been working closely together to transition into the shared services model. Payroll and HR obviously work very closely together, you know, to make sure that payroll is processed appropriately. We have run into some issues, you know, during this transition. Especially we've had some issues with some part-time lecturer payments at the Gateway Community College that we are known about. We have rectified those issues. You know, we understand that those have come up. We hopefully rectified those quickly, but otherwise, outside of those, that known kind of issue with the part-time lecturers at Gateway Community College, payroll really has been processing well under the new organizational model. You know, we have you know, been transitioning, working through, you know, those transitions, going to the shared service. We have moved people from their colleges into the shared services model, processing new college locations, and but really utilizing the same processes that they were utilizing on their college locations, trying to streamline our processes, really trying to make ourselves more efficient with the use of technology, and you know, gathering data and making sure that we're doing this efficiently and effectively. One of the things that we have done over the last couple of months is to reduce the amount of manual data entry. We worked with CORE at the state level to develop a process where we can upload batch payments to CORE, so we don't have to manually enter each and every payment for lump sum payments and things like that, including longevity. And so we piloted this with the payments for the teleworking internet reimbursements that went out for faculty, and that went really well. And we are planning to use this for the longevity payments that are going out here in April. So this has been really huge for payroll. We've worked really closely with HR to get this working with CORE. So that's just one efficiency and improvement that we've made so far, but we're working on others as well, including, you know, looking at making like direct deposits and W-4 changes, self-service, and things like that. So more to come, but we are working through those efficiencies with payroll shared services. Sorry, just one more thing on payroll shared services. Sorry, just one more thing really important to note is that we are in the process of hiring a payroll manager. So we don't have a payroll manager at this time. We've been looking for a payroll manager for probably close to a year now, and that position is still unfilled. So we are still in the interview process. It's open until filled, and so we're working through that at this time. So just wanted to mention that piece. Thanks, Alice.
Laura, why is there a problem, or was there a problem at Gateway with the part-time lecturers, not at other colleges?
That's a good question. Not really sure. Wasn't a different process or anything like that. I think it was just we had some new. We didn't have anybody that came to payroll from Gateway. I think there was no payroll person that came from Gateway. So our payroll shared services staff, they're all new to the Gateway community. And we had some communication difficulties getting the information accurate on the part-time lecturers and processing that appropriately. You know, I think it just was a breakdown in communication, unfortunately, at that point, and really just making sure that we had the right information to process. But once we figured out what the issue was, we were quick to rectify it and get those payments out. We issued a bunch of petty cash checks to make sure that everyone was paid appropriately. We audited the payroll, made sure that everyone was paid appropriately, got the back pay completed, and made sure that everybody's future payments were all accurate and correct. And so I think we rectified that pretty quickly. And we worked with the other agencies to make sure that that's not going to happen in the future. And so it's not that they were running a different process or anything like that. I think it was just, was a blip in the, process there.
So you're saying that it's been fixed, it's been audited, I thought I heard you say, which makes it, it's been checked out and everything is correct, and there are no problems at the other colleges.
That none that I'm aware of. I mean, don't get me wrong, we've had other smaller instances of things at other colleges that, one issue here, one issue there, but none other systemic issues like we like we had at Gateway. And we have gone through the whole payroll register and looked at all the part-time lecturers and believe we have rectified the issue with back payments and petty cash checks and things like that. And have everybody's future payments lined up appropriately at Gateway. So I believe we are all set there. But if anybody has any questions on that, they can always reach out to me. But we have gone through what we have for information and believe we are all set there.
So the other piece of that was that the auditors have also given it their blessing that it's straightened out, it's
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to insinuate auditors, but we have audited as our own payroll team has audited.
Yes.
Sorry, didn't mean to insinuate the auditors, but we have audited ourselves and working with our HR counterparts and had our HR counterparts help us with that audit as well.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for asking and clarifying. Were there any other questions before I move on? We can always come back to. But.
Do I understand correctly? We're hiring a payroll manager, and also I see in the slide that's up now, a financial services specialist. And neither of those positions can be people who've transferred off campuses.
So I mean, we've posted those positions because they are SWOF positions. And so they need to be posted. And so it's not that they can't be filled by somebody on the campuses, but they would need to apply. We have not had anybody from the campuses apply for the payroll manager position or have accepted the position as a payroll manager from the campuses, from the community college campuses. And this finance shared services specialist position has not yet been posted. We are working to get it posted, I think shortly. It should be, or it might have just been posted, but we're hoping that people will apply for it.
One of the things that we've talked about in the past with shared services, especially payroll services, is, and I know this relates only to the community college system at this point with a little Charter Oak on the side. Is this a system that could be applicable to the universities? And do you have any sense how the universities would feel about it?
Absolutely. So it definitely is a system that we feel could be utilized across all 17 institutions. I think it's a shared service that is standard enough, right? We use the same systems and, process payroll similarly across the 17 institutions. I can't really speak to how the other, the college, the university would feel about that. Janelle, I don't know if you have any insight into that.
Yeah, so we are building the finance shared services for all 17 institutions. It's just a matter of we're trying to get the colleges set up and then kind of market and promote the shared services to the universities to hopefully get their participation.
Thank you.
So that kind of leads into accounting shared services. Accounting has been functioning as a shared service in finance for a while now. And this process of finance shared service is really formalizing that process under shared services governance. Accounting does already provide services to all 17 institutions. They do already provide services to the 12 community colleges, to the system office, and to the state universities. And so, you know, in addition to what they do already today, they are taking on the role of centralizing fixed assets, as well as accounts receivable. And that financial services specialist position that we just spoke about is one that we are hoping to recruit for to help stand up the accounts receivable shared service. So we're hoping that candidate will be able to come in and help us move that shared service along and really centralize the accounts receivable piece. So purchasing and AP, these two, we're working on transitioning into a shared service now, working on hopefully doing that towards the middle of April here. All the staff that are affected by this have been notified of their lateral move to shared service. We've been performing a lot of discovery for both purchasing and AP by visiting with all of the campuses individually and talking about what this transition means, what that means for their campus and what tasks are coming to the shared service versus what tasks are going to remain on the campuses, what functions, you know, will need to be performed by somebody on the campus still. That's been a little bit of a challenge, right? Because as we move staff to a shared service, there aren't many staff left on the campus to perform some of those functions. So we've had to get a little creative and work with the campuses on what that will look like when these shared services are in full swing. And so there will be a transition period where some of these tasks are performed, you know, by these staff, both on the college campus and in shared service. And we're working to make sure that, you know, these campuses are not left without staff, you know, to do the work that needs to get done. We are hiring for a purchasing manager, an AP manager, a supplier coordinator, and a P card admin, a purchasing card admin. All of those positions will be SWOF positions. We'll get into that in a minute, I think, as well. So, which leads me into this shared services position slide. So all of these positions listed under the hiring section here are SWOF positions. As most of you know, I'm sure that they'll be required to be posted internally with SWOF first. However, the intention is to post these publicly so that the college employees can apply, you know, and that we'll be looking to hire these 6 positions. Some have been posted, like the payroll manager. The procurement manager has been out to SWOF for the internal posting. And some of these others will be coming out shortly. And then under the lateral moves, these are where we're moving the staff from the campuses directly into the positions at shared services. So we moved 14 staff from the campuses to payroll shared services already. And so they've been operating in the shared service since October. And the rest are AP and purchasing staff that will be moving here sometime in April. These employees will remain in their current unions, but they will start reporting into the system office. Payroll is already reporting into the system office, but AP and purchasing will start reporting into the system office once they migrate into the shared service. So the next few slides are really just org charts. You can kind of get a little overview. You can look at them, and if you have any questions, you can always reach out. But this is just some overviews of what the org charts might look like as we move to a shared service. We do have some upcoming shared services as well, contracts, travel and reimbursement compliance, grants, accounts receivable, as we've already talked about, and then other shared services as we define them. So these shared services are planned as we move forward. As we just talked about, AP and purchasing are upcoming next, and then as we move forward, these other ones will be implemented.
Thank you very much, Laura and Janelle. I think I would invite committee members to review the slides, which we received last night, and we'll also share them with the rest of the board. And I have the feeling that going forward, we'll have another chance to reconnect. We're going to lose one of our other members shortly, so I want to ask Diane and Mike to talk to us briefly about the human resources shared services. Alice, you want to say something?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I was gonna suggest, if you were willing, that we could set table this presentation until the next meeting and ask Mike and Diane to come back with the telework idea and the shared services and human resources, so that it can get a fuller discussion, if you'd like, because I'm sure that
I think that's a great suggestion. Thank you very much. Let's move to Pam and Patrick Carr for a discussion about digital archiving. Thank you for the materials. I think it was very clear what you're doing, but I, of course, would like to invite you to say whatever you would like.
Super, thank you. So we're going to move the HR shared services to May and revisit the remote work draft of policies at the same time.
Yes, please, if we could. Thank you, Mike and Diane. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm joined by Patrick Carr, and we have been working on a project that was in existence prior to my arrival. But we think we have a possible solution to a problem that's currently on our books. We know that CSCU, its system offices, and all of the community colleges and universities require an ability to preserve and access public records of the institution forever. Government's records have significant value and implications for institutional knowledge. Higher education is becoming a very, very popular research topic, and we have really no systemic way to research, inquire to the history of CSCU or to the previous institutions prior to 2011. So for our first foray into digital archiving, we have proposed in the statement of work that you received a couple of days ago that board resolutions, as they need to be retained for the lifetime of the institution, be our first attempt to create a trusted, valued, accessible resource for the preservation of the CSCU history. It will eliminate, and I speak for Ernestine Weaver, it will eliminate all of the binders in our offices and all of the pieces of paper that are being compiled but have no accurate way of ensuring that they're complete. The inquiries that we get regularly for old board resolutions. Last month, we received a request for a 1994 board resolution from Naugatuck Valley Community College, but the college had no way of accessing it, nor did we here in the system office have an accurate, complete way of researching that request. And also from an academic and student affairs standpoint, we get regular requests to track down the history of a policy or a resolution to see and make sure that old policies are either amended or rescinded in place of new policies. So we're hoping that and I'll turn this over to Patrick to explain our first attempt at a solution.
Thank you, Pam, and good morning, everyone. My name is Patrick Carr, and I'm the Program Manager for Library Consortium Operations for the CSU Library Consortium. This consortium includes all of the libraries in the CSU system, along with the Connecticut State Library And our mission is to collaborate in support of success, equity, diversity, social justice, and access to resources that spark creativity and intellectual enrichment. I've been happy to partner with Pam and others on the project to prepare to digitally archive board materials. Based on the description of the problem that Pam provided, I recommended the Connecticut Digital Archive, or CTDA as it is commonly referred to, as a repository that would be ideally suited for the long-term preservation of and access to board materials. The CTDA is administered by the University of Connecticut Library, and it serves the entire state by providing educational and cultural institutions across the state with an online repository for maintenance, delivery, and preservation of, currently they have about 2.5 million digital resources. Use of the CTDA comes at no charge, and the CTDA complies with key standards and best practices for data preservation and management, and it is approved by the Connecticut State Archives for storage of permanent records. In addition to providing a repository for preservation and access, the CTDA is a partner with the Digital Public Library of America, which is a well-known, widely used online resource used by researchers and students everywhere to access the digital resources of archives, libraries, museums, and other cultural institutions. So as a result, ingestion of board materials into the CTDA will not only preserve them, but it will make them easily discoverable and accessible to people everywhere. So once we have identified the CTDA as the platform that will best meet our needs, we met with representatives from the CTDA, and we also met with representatives from the libraries of the two universities in the CSU system who currently use the CTDA. And those are Central Connecticut State University and Southern Connecticut State University. And I'll note that actually earlier this week, the New Haven Register featured an excellent article highlighting Southern's digital collections of papers concerning New Haven's past mayors. And Pam and I would like to take this opportunity to thank the following people at those libraries: from Central, Sharon Clapp, Dana Hanford, and Brian Matsky, and then from Southern, Patrick Crowley, Parker Fruhan, and Jackie Toos. The expertise and experiences that they shared helped Pam and I to get a clear understanding of the procedures, tools, and skills that were needed to assign metadata to board materials and then to create and upload digital representations into the CTDA. And lastly, another partner in this project that we would like to thank is Dr. Brian Reel, who is an assistant professor of information and library science at Southern. Dr. Reel oversees internships of students in Southern's information and library science program, and he's been working now to recruit one or more students who would potentially be interns this summer to begin the potential execution of the project. And that being said, I will turn things back over to Pam to talk about next steps.
Thank you. Just a couple of things. The interns that Dr. Reel is proposing would be unpaid. So they would get their course credit and requirement for an internship for their summer program, for their master's program. So for a no cost involvement with CTDA and with personnel and support services through internships, we're proposing that we establish a formal relationship with CTDA by signing an MOU that will establish our partnership. That MOU is with legal now with Ernestine, and we don't expect any concerns coming from that review. CTDA has offered full training to Patrick, to me, to our administrative assistant, as well as to any interns in establishing a process to organize the data, to create searchable and sorting protocols that will help us establish the proper procedures to get all of the documents uploaded to CTDA. We will continue to maintain ownership of, will continue on the back end to assemble all of the pre-2015 and pre-CSCU resolutions that exist at all of the colleges and universities so that we can create a proper history and document this process for the staff, for CTDA and our interns. And we'll be spending the next couple of months establishing milestones to measure our success through this project. So before we sign the MOU, we wanted to bring this committee and the rest of the board members up to speed on what we think will be, once again, an efficient, trusted, low-cost solution to our resource requirements for the board. And that's what we have.
Thank you, Patrick and Pam. Very interesting. I sat with Ernestine when she first arrived. She and I sort of arrived together, and they gave her all those big notebooks and said, whatever, here, handle it. And I think there was some board policy that we did at some point that said that the policies of the board, if they weren't for the management confidentials, if they weren't included, this was the new manual, which would change from time to time, but the rest I thought went away. I don't know how you archive that or if you want to archive that, but I just throw that out there. The other thing I would ask is, when you say the interns will get credit, has that run through some academic and student affairs kind of a review and the powers that be in deciding what courses get credit around board for this?
And Patrick, jump in if you feel the need. The interns are coming from the Masters of Science program in Library Sciences at Southern. So there are particular guidelines that are already spelled out in the master's program that establish the relationship with in our case, we serve as the business owner, and their interaction with us, how much is supported through coursework, and the requirement for us to report back to the internship coordinator to make sure that all of our needs are being met, the students' needs are being met, as well as the program needs are being met. So those are all spelled out in the documents of the internship program at Southern.
Okay, I think this has been very helpful. I hope that when we do the history, in some ways it looks like what you see in the statutes, where it shows you every time the statute has been changed and explains to you what the changes were.
The resolutions as business of the board might not do that, but our next phase will be to look at board agendas, board minutes, and board policies as a way, this is CTDA, as a way to archive those historical documents. When we get to the board policies, I anticipate it to look like the legislative footnoting that you see when you read those policies.
Thank you. And thank you for what you're doing. It's really, really needed. And we sometimes forget that because it's such a daunting task, but it's very important. And I thank you for what you're doing. If there are no other questions, I would accept Regent Balducci's motion to adjourn, which I would second, with our thanks to all of you for coming today and for your work on these very important projects that we learned about this morning.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day.
Thank you all. Thank you, Naomi.
Thank you.
Thank you. The stream has ended.